able to present this in International Mental Health Week. It's very, very relevant and very appropriate. So first of all, let me start by asking the question, what is homotherapy? What do I mean when I say homotherapy? My whole presentation is based on this concept of homotherapy. Homotherapy means healing and purifying the atmosphere, soil and water resources with fire as the medium. The central idea in homotherapy is you heal the atmosphere and the healed atmosphere heals you. And of all the 5 practices given in the ancient science of homotherapy, Agnihotra is the basic homa. Now, today on our planet, the whole planet is now contaminated with many types of pollution. Automobiles, factory exhausts, water pollution, noise pollution. The oceans are polluted by the disposal of nuclear waste. There's an effect of radiation poisoning on the human body, indiscriminate cutting of forests for raw materials, indiscriminate mining of the planet for raw materials to feed the industrial complex, indiscriminate use of pesticides, insecticides, chemical fertilizers, etc. All these things adversely affect the atmosphere in which we all live. This leads to a tension which comes on the mind and an increase in the incidence of disease, nervousness, and psychiatry. Pollution actually is the major issue of our time. It has a great impact on our mental health, and there are many scientific studies now which have shown that Agnihotra can neutralize various types of pollution. Here's one such study which was done recently here in India. I'm staying in India, in Maharashtra, and this study was done at the North Maharashtra University. And in that particular study, we tested air quality for various pollutants, such as the compounds of sulfur and nitrogen. And the results clearly showed that after Agnihotra, the amount of particulate matter, the pollution in the atmosphere, was drastically reduced. You can see from the figures there in the bottom line, 15 hours after Agnihotra Homa, the figures came down to a very, very low level. This shows that Agnihotra does indeed purify the atmosphere. Now, Agnihotra also removes tension from the mind, unburdens the mind. And by the practice of Agnihotra, you will soon notice that anger and greed also become less and you feel free. This brings about happiness. How does this work? How does Agnihotra affect the mind? So, Agnihotra we know is performed for purification of the atmosphere. But in the ancient wisdom, it is stated that by inducing a change in the atmosphere, you bring about a change in the functioning of prana, life energy. And prana and mind are like 2 sides of the same coin, and hence the beneficial change in atmosphere is immediately transposed to the realm of the mind. And here's a graphic which shows that. First we start in the top corner with Agnihotra. Beneficial change occurs in the atmosphere, which automatically affects the functioning of prana, and prana and mind can be taken like 2 sides of the same coin. So the beneficial change is immediately transposed to the mind. This is how Agnihotra benefits the mind. So what is Agnihotra exactly? There are many different versions of Agnihotra taught in India. When I talk about Agnihotra, I mean a small homa which is performed in a copper pyramid kund, and this particular method, how Agnihotra affects the mind. You can see we start with Agnihotra here in the top corner, creates a beneficial change in the atmosphere which automatically affects the functioning of prana, life energy, and the prana and mind can be seen like two sides of the same coin. So the beneficial effect which comes to prana is automatically transposed to the realm of the mind. This is how Agnihotra affects the human mind. Agnihotra is the smallest homa, performed to the specific biorhythm of sunrise and sunset. Comes from the ancient most Vedic sciences of bioenergy, medicine, agriculture, and climate engineering. For Agnihotra, you need a copper pyramid kund, dried cow dung cakes, pure cow's ghee, unbroken, unpolished rice grains, simple Sanskrit mantra, and the exact timing of sunrise and sunset for your particular location. The fire should be fully ablaze in the pyramid at the exact time of sunrise and sunset. You take a few grains of the unbroken rice in left hand, apply a few drops of cow's ghee to this rice and divide it into two portions. These are the two offerings. And after each swaha in the mantra, you offer one portion of this rice ghee mixture into the fire. The mantras are very simple Sanskrit. Even foreigners like me can learn them very, very quickly. I'll just sing them for you. At sunrise, the mantra is Suryaya Swaha, Suryaya Idam Namama, Prajapataye Swaha, Prajapataye Idam Namama. And at sunset, the mantra is Agnaye Swaha, Agnaye Idam Namama, Prajapataye Swaha, Prajapataye Idam Namama. So here are a couple of quotes from the Theravada tradition. In addition to other effects, at certain intervals, bursts of energy emanate from the Agnihotra copper pyramid, depending on the phase of the moon and the position of the earth in relation to the sun. These bursts of energy from the pyramid thrust nutrients and fragrance through the solar range, having a profound impact on the human mind. And another quotation is this: tremendous amounts of energy are gathered around the Agnihotra copper pyramid just at that Agnihotra time. A magnetic type field is created, one which neutralizes negative types of energy and reinforces positive type of energy. Therefore, a positive pattern is created by one who does Agnihotra merely by doing that performance of Agnihotra. Now, I want to give you a few examples of, first of all, some scientific studies which were done about the connection of Agnihotra and mind, and then later some case histories of various people who've had very good results practicing the Agnihotra. The first study is about drug addiction. The drug was heroin. Very dangerous drug, heroin addiction. This study was done in the Army Hospital in Delhi Cantonment quite a few years ago, more than 30 years before. There was a 25-year-old Army officer who was addicted to heroin. He was introduced to the heroin in October 1984. He started with 1/4 gram per day. But after 10 months, this increased to 3 grams per day. 2 previous attempts at de-addiction by normal psychotherapeutic approaches had failed. This subject was demotivated and resistant to any attempts to help him out of the addiction. Means he just wanted to continue with the drug. In October 1985, he developed severe withdrawal symptoms when he could not get the drug. In December 1985, he was transferred to the Delhi Army Hospital. There, the doctors monitored his progress which for 2 or 3 months was not very promising. But in March 1986, the doctors had given up all hopes of conventional treatment, and he was finally introduced to Agnihotra, March 1986. He developed an inclination, means he liked that, Agnihotra, and he voluntarily joined the group for the performance of Agnihotra. After 7 days, he began to practice Agnihotra by himself. Now, here's the result of the study. The study took place over more than 1 year. The doctors involved devised a simple rating system to roughly chart the progress of this patient. The scoring for this system was 0 to 7, and the urge to take the drug and the motivation to leave the drug on a scale of 0 to 7, the number 7 representing the greatest urge to take the drug and also the greatest motivation to leave the drug. And you can see in the diagram, which they gave on the right-hand side, at the top, we start with the urge for the drug. And for the first 3 months from December through to about February, not much change happened. He was in the high to severe category, 6 and 7. But then something dramatic happened in March 1986 when he started to practice Agnihotra. There's a massive reduction in his urge for the drug. You can see that graph falling dramatically up until June. And then after June, when he left the program and also stopped practicing Agnihotra, you can see that the urge for the drug continues to be at a very, very minimal level. So this shows that Agnihotra had an incredible impact on this drug addict, and we can say that the de-addiction, leaving the drug because of Agnihotra, was an absolute total success. Now the next, I just want to mention here, a program for alcohol and drug de-addiction was developed in the US in the 1980s. Agnihotra is the basic program in that drug de-addiction program. It was an in-residence program given in home atmosphere, and by daily practice of Agnihotra, motivation comes to avoid alcohol and drugs. When motivation comes, half the battle is won. Now, here's another study which was done recently in Russia. Before that, let me just talk about stress and anxiety for a little. Feeling of stress and anxiety, depression, etc. are all aggravating factors for all kinds of disease. And this is now very important in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic, because these factors very seriously impact on our ability to be able to withstand this coronavirus. So Agnihotra, according to Vedic teachings, attracts and balances and harmonizes the prana. And many testimonials and some studies clearly show that regular performance of Agnihotra reduces stress, fear, depression, and anxiety. This results in a notable boost for the whole immune system. Now, this slide shows results from another study which was done in Moscow, Russia, some years before. A group of people came for Agnihotra regularly for 2 weeks. Anxiety and depression were the 2 factors which were measured before and after Agnihotra. And you can see from the colored bars in the graph, there were 7 particular patients. They're represented across the bottom of the diagram. And in each particular case, the result, the measurement of the parameter, either anxiety or depression, after Agnihotra was much less than the measurement which was taken before the Agnihotra. So it's clear that Agnihotra has a very, very strong impact on reducing anxiety, and depression. Now here's a study which was done in Germany in 2015. These tests were made at the Institute for Communication and Brain Research in Stuttgart in Germany. There was one physicist and a brain researcher, Dr. Gunther Hofelder, and he developed a new method of EEG spectral analysis, which allows detection even of small signals of the limbic system where emotions are processed. Now, in this particular study, 4 persons were connected up to the EEG, the electroencephalogram, for measuring brainwave activity, just in time for Agnihotra. And you can see there in the photo, 3 of those people were practicing Agnihotra. One was just a bystander who didn't actually know Agnihotra and just participated to see what would happen. You can see electrodes are connected to their heads for measuring the brainwave activity. And what the results showed was that the 4 persons all entered a state of relaxation during the Agnihotra. All the 4 subjects showed a rapid and significant change of brainwave function after the singing of the last syllable of the mantra. The Agnihotra mantra seems to act as a trigger and takes everyone involved in the area to a higher spiritual level of consciousness, which opens other areas of perception. And this also applied to the person who was not practicing Agnihotra, who was just sitting there observing as a witness. She was also affected in exactly the same way. And here we have a diagram showing that particular graph, the EEG, and you can see that after Agnihotra, the brain waves are significantly different to what they were before Agnihotra. Dr. Hofelder has worked for decades doing countless EEG measurements on various people from various countries, involved in remote and spiritual healing, meditation techniques, and extrasensory perception techniques. What he noted was an unexpected and remarkable result with this Agnihotra on the brain waves of these 4 people. Now here are some testimonies from various people who have got very positive results with the Agnihotra on their mental and psychological problems. A lot of these stories come from South American countries. Agnihotra is very, very popular now in many South American countries. And here's a photograph taken in a hospital, a clinic in the capital of Peru. That's a country on the west coast of South America. Lima is the capital. And you can see many, many people gathered there in this hospital room doing Agnihotra together at exactly the same time. And these Agnihotra sessions have become very popular, and many people have reported very, very good results from attending these sessions. The first case I'd like to mention is a case of depression. This lady, Maria Veronica Bastidas from Ecuador in South America. She says, 6 weeks ago I was given the Agnihotra ash at a time when my father was on the verge of death. He could not eat without help, and he had been taking pills for 30 years for insomnia and also antidepressants. He couldn't walk, he couldn't talk, spasms were coming more and more frequently and severely. She took him to a neurologist who said there was nothing left to do, since your father was completely dependent on the drugs. At this particular time, she says she gave her father Agnihotra ash. I told him it was Ayurvedic medicine and that he had to take it with his food. Then, after taking this ash, the spasms disappeared and he began to eat again. Neurologists suggested that he reduce the medication gradually. And now my father does not take any tranquilizers nor antidepressants. He continues taking the Agnihotra ash He is totally cured of his depression. He now works with me in the clinic. He's a new man at the age of 62. Fantastic story. Another story, this is about drug addiction. Luis Enrique Tuja from Peru. He says, I was a very angry and bitter person. If anyone said something to me, I would react very badly. I was taking marijuana. After practicing homotherapy for a month, that behavior disappeared completely and I felt a lot of peace within me. I felt great, and so I left the marijuana. But then I stopped doing Agnihotra. Big mistake. My life became a hell. And then recently I've realized that what my problem is, and I tried to awaken my spiritual side. I never got that homotherapy out of my mind. I came here once again to the homotherapy session and I did Agnihotra. Then I wanted to practice it every day. I found peace. This homotherapy makes you aware. Now I know how good it feels and I want to continue this. Now here's a story from a doctor, a psychologist, who had a young daughter who was suffering from schizophrenia. She says, Dr. Irma Gary, at an early age, my daughter showed symptoms of aggression and hyperactivity. She was given Ritalin, the drug Ritalin, and other medications in order to be controlled. At the age of 12, she was diagnosed with schizophrenia. This meant constant crisis, and our house seemed to be like a psychiatric hospital. The medication for schizophrenia made her sleep 24 hours a day. It was terrible. My desperation was even greater because I saw her suffer a living death. Thank God I learned about homotherapy. Many saw my daughter. When we came here for the first Agnihotra session, she was screaming. But in the third session, she stopped screaming. And until today, we have never again had to face that aggression and total lack of control from her. So much so that within 6 months, gradually, I took her off all her medication. Now she is completely well and she does not take any medication at all. We only practice homotherapy. What an incredible success story. Here's a story from Peru, another story, a lady by the name of Flor Paco. Her son was very violent, 13 years old. He was expelled from school several times, had to change schools. One day she asked her doctor what she could do about this. He advised her, you do Agnihotra and the Homa fires. So she brought him to the homotherapy sessions where the Agnihotra was practiced. This year, he's been one of the best students. The teacher said he's very attentive. Also, he does not fight anymore and does not get expelled from the school. I give him Agnihotra ash in his milk. Great story. Here's a story from Colombia, also in South America. Gladys Elvira Arias. She was also depressive. She had depression and also bipolar syndrome. Her problems since she was a child. At age 10, she attempted to commit suicide. At age 23, she was under psychiatric treatment. She was taking medication because of episodes of bipolar. She had no motivation to live. I tried to follow the model of a successful woman. I tried to be superwoman. I demanded so much from myself that I broke. At the age of 38, I entered into a crisis and started taking the drug lithium. I had 2 weeks with no sleep, not even for 5 minutes. 4 years later, fortunately, I was invited to a homotherapy meeting. That day, I felt something very special. I had never had that wonderful feeling before. The next day, when waking up, I felt a sense of peace and joy and lots of energy, but in a controlled manner. It was wonderful. I had this feeling the whole day. Then I asked myself, what could be the reason for this? And the answer was clear. Agnihotra. I no longer suffer from anxiety or despair or distress or sadness, nothing. And I no longer take lithium. Great story. Here's another story about addiction. This lady from US. She said, I've been practicing Agnihotra since December 2003. Things were a total disaster at that time in my life. I lost everything, including almost my own life, to a drug overdose. I underwent the homotherapy drug de-addiction program in the country Peru, South America, for 3 months. The next 6 months, she came here to India and she spent that time here with me in Tupperware. When she returned to the US and the daily routine, things were very different. She was not so angry or confused anymore, and she had absolutely no more desire for the drugs. Here's another story about schizophrenia. This particular lady, her son, had been seeing psychologists, the best professionals in her country, since he was a small child. Up to 3 times in a week, he had to go to the psychologist. Her husband and she were unable to manage him in spite of being education professionals. The boy was very aggressive. Many times he had anger attacks to the point that he threw chairs. From the 1st to the 4th year of high school, he failed in all his subjects. When he was in the 4th year, I had the opportunity to learn and practice homotherapy. After 2 months practicing Agnihotra continuously, my son passed all the exams without failing in a single subject, and he entered into the next year, the 5th year. This was a surprise for the whole school and for the professors and teachers also. In his 6th year, his grades were so good that he was among the top students who graduated. Now my son is studying systems engineering at the university. Homotherapy has really helped us. I regularly practice Agnihotra every day. After practicing Agnihotra regularly for 2 months, my son said goodbye to the psychologist and never again had these anger attacks. Now he's a very lovely young man with a healthy attitude. Wonderful story. And here's another story from Peru. So many success stories from South America. This lady had depression, insomnia, anxiety. She was also a doctor, Dr. Carmen Luz Mendoza. She underwent eye surgery, and she became extremely nervous after that surgery. Nervous, obsessive, and paranoid. She was going into a deep depression. I could not work. I could not resume my normal family life. I felt very bad, very distressed. A psychiatrist diagnosed me with generalized anxiety disorder and obsessive-compulsive disorder with panic attacks. I was taking the drugs fluoxetine and clonazepam. I started attending the homotherapy sessions, and since the very first session, it has helped me to overcome the tough situation I was living. I experienced an atmosphere of love, selfless service and help, which increased my feelings and concern for others and the welfare of all. I have begun to experience a holistic healing process, improving my physical and spiritual well-being. I take Agnihotra ash at least 3 times in a day. The Agnihotra ash is also a very powerful medicinal substance. Another story from Colombia. Hyperactivity in children. This lady, Inez Luz Cordova, she said her 6-year-old son has attention deficit disorder and hyperactivity. He's been taking psychiatric drugs for 3 years because without them, he couldn't sleep and no one else could bear him. Without the drugs, he usually spent sleepless nights. I had to deal with him at 3 o'clock in the morning. He also hit himself every day because he was super active. For 10 days, I have given him the Agnihotra ash, and I have not given him the drug, which supposedly he has to take for the rest of his life, psychiatric drug. She stopped that completely. Only Agnihotra ash she's giving. Now he sleeps very well. My child is fine. Wonderful story about the Agnihotra. Now here's a lady from Peru, Maria Inés Núñez. She said she learned about homotherapy in 1999 when she was 11 years old. She stopped doing the home of fires when she moved to another city. But today, 20 years later, she's again taken it up, thanks to her mother. I'm pregnant with second baby. I feel very tired and annoyed. I just wanted to remain lying down. I felt anguish and anxiety. At night, it was hard for me to fall asleep and I woke up too early. But since I've resumed the practice of Agnihotra at sunrise and sunset, I feel totally different. The anguish and anxiety have disappeared. I no longer feel tired. I feel very calm. I feel very lucid to think and make decisions. Even my 2-year-old son has been sleeping continuously during the night since I resumed the practice of the Homa fires. Wonderful. Now here's another story about addiction. This is a counselor, professional counselor, who tells her story of her journey out of addiction. Ana Maria Alvarado from Colombia. She says, I took drugs, liquor, tobacco, everything. Freeing myself from all these things was very difficult. Aromatherapy really helps. It takes away the anxiety. It helps you keep focused on what is good for you. It helps to remove those things that we do not want and helps us to attract the things which we need. I used to get well and then fall back. I would get well again and then fall back again. Several times I did that. But now I have aromatherapy on my side. It's an ally in my life. Now I really do not want to take more drugs. I prefer the feeling the Homa fires give me, which is better than smoking a joint, better than drinking or taking any drug. It's better to feel good and have a clear and stable mind. Homa fires are real magic from God to get rid of the monster that is the addiction. A wonderful story. Here's another story from Colombia. This lady, Luz Arevalo, had depression. 3 months ago, she separated from her husband. She felt very depressed as a woman and even as a mother because her daughter was blaming her for the separation with her husband. She was invited to the Women's Healing Circle, where I felt very welcome and where I got everything needed to start the practice of Agnihotra. Before going there, I was very sad and I was crying. But after Agnihotra, I slept like a baby. After seeing the change in me, my daughter also came to the aromatherapy session. Her behavior changed completely in less than 24 hours. Now she is loving, she hugs me, and every hour she calls me to say, Mom, I love you. Before the aromatherapy session, my daughter was suffering from a severe headache, and by participating in the Agnihotra and taking its ash, the headache completely disappeared, and she felt happy. Great story. Now here's a story about aggression. This lady, Ana Maria from Colombia, her son is 20 years old. He's been very rebellious and very aggressive, very difficult for his whole life. I think he is still not yet past adolescence. 2 weeks ago, I started doing Agnihotra at home, she said. My son told me it smelled ugly and asked what it was for. I told him, you can join me whenever you want. Last week, he saw me doing Agnihotra in the garage, and he came and sat right next to me, and surprisingly, he put his hands respectfully near the fire, and then placed them over his head, chest, and stomach. The next day, he asked me, aren't you going to do the fire? The truth is, he has already changed his behavior. He greets me nicer, he's quieter, and he does not fight so much with his sister. The Homa fires are changing him. Now I'm putting the Agnihotra ash in his hot chocolate. Another story about schizophrenia from Paraguay in South America. Fidelina Brustela. My son suffers from schizophrenia. He is very impatient. When he wants to go home, he just leaves. I have to quickly leave with him. I even have a priority attention pass at the hospital for whenever we need to go there because he gets so desperate. But here, in this Homa atmosphere, an incredible thing happens with him. He remains calm. He himself wants to come for Agnihotra and see that big improvement in him. I see that big improvement in him. Wonderful story from Paraguay. Here's another story from Peru. Giovanna Calle Vasquez. She's also suffering from depression and insomnia. I suffered for years with depression and anxiety. I could hardly sleep. I was irritated and I could not handle my son. I went with my son to the homotherapy session. I began to feel calmer. I sleep peacefully now, and my son also. Little by little, my level of anxiety is reducing. I already feel calmer, more relaxed. I've lost weight too. When the time for Agnihotra approaches, I'm unable to stay at home. I have to come to the homotherapy sessions. And my son asks me, Mama, give me my ash. I feel that homotherapy is very good for me, and I'm going to get my own Agnihotra kit. And the last story I want to tell you is a story about autism. Autism is a very, very difficult subject of our time. This is a young girl by the name of Aurelis from Colombia in South America. Her carer was a doctor called Luz Mary Mora, and she says, I have been bringing some children to the Agnihotra healing sessions at the Homa Medical Center. For the past 3 days, I have brought Aurelis, who is 23 years old and has severe autism since birth. She occasionally has very strong crises, especially when someone touches her. That is a characteristic of some of these autistic children. When she gets into a crisis, not even a strong man can handle her. She produces so much adrenaline. Today, this same child, who usually provokes a crisis when he tries to play with her, was just sitting calmly on her lap when I arrived. They were playing together and they were laughing. There was no crisis. There was no anguish. I couldn't believe it. She has participated only twice in the Agnihotra fires and took the ash. I think that is real progress. And so do I. Fantastic story. Hyperactive children know Agnihotra is the only remedy for hyperactive children. There is no other remedy available. Agnihotra has a great effect on removing tension from the mind. Regular practice of Agnihotra makes the mind full of love, and automatically guidance comes how to face the situations in life. This is the experience of thousands of people in different countries who practice Agnihotra. This simple Agnihotra is so powerful. Your mind becomes full of love, and once that happens, you are on the path of light. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure presenting to you today, and I hope you've benefited from